Hey there, first graders. Happy Wednesday. Miss Schwartz here. Today we are doing a math activity. And we're going to go ahead and jump right in because the activity we're going to do today is super fun. And I want to make sure that you guys can get straight to it. So here I have a clock. Before we can actually start talking about the clock, we have to remember which hands are the hour hands and which hands are the minute hands. Because remember, clocks, just like us, they've got hands, but they don't look like our hands. They look like these arrows that I have in the corner here. So we have to remember, hour is the shorter word. So the hour hand is always the shorter hand. Minute is the longer word. Do you see how minute has more letters? It's a longer word. So the minute hand is always the longer hand. The hour hand is always the shorter hand. The hour hand is always the shorter hand. The minute hand is always the longer hand. The minute hand is always the minute hand is always the longer hand. Now, I'm about to move my minute hand to the clock, but before I do, I got to make sure we remember something. Now, our minute hand moves from left to right in a circle around our clock. We call that clockwise. Our minute hand is going to move clockwise or from left to right around our clock. Every time the minute hand moves, it means 1 minute has passed. Now, our minute hand always starts at 12. When our minute hand is at 12, it means that no minutes have passed. When our minute hand starts at 12, it means that no minutes have passed. It means 0 minutes have passed because no minutes have passed, right? When our minute hand is pointing to the 12, the way we read that or say it is o'clock. When the minute hand points to 12, we say o'clock. Now I'm just going to move my hour hand over to a random time. When my minute hand is pointing to 12, my hour hand is always going to point directly to a number. So the way that I would read this clock, because I always start with my hour first, I would read it as 3 o'clock. Now remember, when it's o'clock, it means that 0 minutes have passed. That's why my digital clock has 00 right here, because it means that 0 minutes have passed. I would read this clock as 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. Your turn? Yes, and I say 3 o'clock because the hour hand is pointing to my 3 and 0 minutes have passed. I know that 0 minutes have passed because that that minute hand is pointing to the 12 and it means it hasn't moved at all. Now we're gonna look at our minute hand in a different direction. Now remember, our minute hand is going to move clockwise or from left to right around the clock. When my minute hand is pointing to the 6 right here, it means that it's made it halfway around my clock. I'm even gonna color that in. Let me get my annotator really quickly. I'm even gonna color that in because remember, I'm gonna use purple. My minute hand moves like this around my clock. This is the direction that it moves in. So when it gets to the 6, I'm gonna go up a little bit. I can see that I've moved halfway around my clock. There are 60 minutes in an hour, which means that if I'm halfway around my clock, my minute hand has moved 30 minutes because 30 is half of 60. My minute hand, remember, it's gonna start at 12, and every time it moves, it means 1 minute has passed. If my minute hand has made it halfway around my clock, that means that 30 minutes have passed. When my minute hand is pointing to the 6, I say 30 because it means that 30 minutes have passed. Now I want you to pay attention to what happens when I move my hour hand. There we go, when I move my hour hand. Now before, when we were looking at that clock, the hour hand was pointing directly to a number. But when I look at it right here, let me get my annotator I got again. When I look right here, my hour hand isn't actually pointing to a number. It's pointing between two numbers. Call out what two numbers it's pointing between. That's right, it's pointing between the 4 and the 5. Now, when I look at my hour hand, it's half past the 4. Because remember, just like my minute hand, my hour hand is also gonna move clockwise or from left to right around the clock like this. So this means that my hour hand has gone this way around my clock and it is past 4. It's half past 4 because it is in the middle of the 4 and the 5. It hasn't gotten to 5 o'clock yet. It's half past 4 because my hour hand is in the middle of the 4 and the 5. So I could say this 2 ways. I could say 4:30 because, excuse me, because the hour hand is half past 4 and the minute hand is pointing to 6, which I know I say 30. Or I could say half past 4. So I could read this clock 2 different ways. I could say 4:30, or I could say half past 4. This is how that would look on a digital clock. 4, because it's half past the 4, it's not at the 5 yet. And 30, because I know that when my minute hand is pointing to 6, it means that 30 minutes have passed. 4:30 or half past 4. 4:30 or half past 4. What are the 2 times? Yes, 4:30 or half past 4, because remember, I'm going to draw that one more time. This hour hand is halfway between the 4 and the 5. It is halfway past 4. Great job. Now that we got through that review, we have a really fun activity. It's going to be really goofy, and then you guys are going to get the chance to do it on your own. So we're going to look at a bunch of clocks, and we're going to think about what we were doing at the time on the clock that is showing. But for the example, we're first going to do a day in the life with my buddy Bobby. Now, for those of you who don't know, Bobby is my dog, and I love him very, very much. So we are going to look at what Bobby is doing at the different times on these clocks in the next few slides. So our first clock says morning. So I know that this is going to be sometime in the morning. Now, I've got my clock down here that has the time, but I see that my clock up here, my analog clock, doesn't have the hands. So I need to use my digital clock to draw the hands on my analog clock. I'm going to use the time on the digital clock to draw the hands on my analog clock. So I know that I read from left to right. I read from right. I read from left to right. So it says 7:00. Right. When I see 00, I know I say o'clock. 7:00. So if this is my hour, that means that must be where my hour hand is pointing. But I also need to pay attention to that minute before I draw the hour. This says 00, right? It says 00. Now I remember that my hour hand is always going to start, my minute hand. My minute hand is always going to start at the 12. And if it says 00, I know that means that 0 minutes have passed. So I am going to draw my arrow up to the 12 because it says 00. I know that my minute hand is always going to start at the 12, and if 0 minutes have passed, that minute hand must still be pointing to the 12. Now my hour hand, I know that because the minute hand is pointing to my 12, my hour hand is going to be pointing exactly to this number. It's going to be pointing to the 7. Now I have to make sure that my hour hand is shorter, because I know that my hour hand is always going to be shorter than my minute hand. I cannot be drawing my hour hand as long as my minute hand, because I know that my minute hand is always going to be shorter. I know that my hour hand is always going to be shorter than my minute hand. The time is 7:00. 7:00. I know that when my minute hand points to 12, I say, yes, I say o'clock. Now let's take a look at what Bobby was doing at 7:00. Bobby was still sleeping. At 7:00 this morning, Bobby was passed out on his little dog bed. This is how he sleeps. He is a weirdo. Let's go ahead and check out this afternoon clock. This time you guys are gonna write it down. Oopsies, I gotta make sure I clear my drawing first. Now this time, my analog clock has the hands, but my digital clock is missing the time. On your boards, write down the time that this clock is showing. I'm gonna give you 15 seconds. On your boards, write down the time that this clock is showing. Hold it up when you got it, show it to your screen. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Your digital clock should be showing the time. Oopsies, let me get the right tool that I need. 11:30. I'm gonna show you how we figure that out. When I look at my hour hand, remember, my hour hand is going to move clockwise or from left to right around the clock like this. Now, I see that my hour hand is pointing right here. I see that my hour hand is pointing right there. It is halfway past the 11. It's half past 11. That's how I know that I write 11 first, because remember, I always start with my hour. It's half past 11. And I know that when my minute hand is pointing to 6, it means that 30 minutes have passed. That's why I write 11:30, or I could read that as half past 11, because that hour hand is halfway past the 11. 11:30 or half past 11. Let's take a look at what Bobby was doing at 11:30 this afternoon. Drum roll, please. Bobby was hanging out with his best friend, Annie. This is Bobby right here. He is hugging his girlfriend, Annie. This is his best friend and girlfriend at daycare that he goes to. So Bobby's just hanging out with Annie at daycare. Aren't they so cute together? They're so cute. Now, you guys are going to go back to Seesaw, and you are going to do a very similar activity. On some of these, on all of these, I have an analog clock and a digital clock. Sometimes the digital clock is going to show the time. Sometimes the analog clock is showing the time. You need to fill in the missing clock. So right here, I'm going to look at the digital clock and I'm going to draw my hands. Right here, my hands are already there. I need to fill in my digital clock. And again, down here, I see my digital clock. I got to draw the hands on my analog clock. And then you guys can either take a picture to show what you are doing at these times, or you can draw a picture to show what you were doing at these times. Bobby and I cannot wait to see what you guys were doing at all these times. Thanks for stopping by and seeing what Bobby and I were doing for this activity. You guys did great. And I cannot wait to see your beautiful pictures or drawings. Goodbye, everyone.